there. Guess where you guys are? Switch for Good podcast.
Yay!
I'm Dotsie. This is Alexandra. What's happening?
Hey, I'm excited about our guest today because I have this eternal dilemma every time I get food for my cats because they eat meat. They will not eat vegan cat food. And so I go into the store and I try and find the least cruel cans of food. And so I've settled on fish and beef because I figure they haven't suffered as long in confinement. But the truth is, I realized when I was through this dilemma, and I was telling one time the pet store, could you tell me about what's going on with this cattle and blah, blah, blah. He said, cats don't really eat cows anyway, and they don't eat fish, and they don't eat chickens, they don't eat turkey, they eat moles and mice. And I said, well, why don't they have cat food with that? He goes, I don't know.
I still feel like you and Evan should drive up to Panga Canyon every Saturday and just sweep the road, and that would be the cat food. And then,
then I wouldn't have this cruelty-free
have any dilemma. They already,
right,
unfortunately, got hit.
Right. I wouldn't feel like I'm part of the devastation of all these animals. I know.
Yeah.
It's so hard.
But you also sound like me when I went vegan before my husband did, and he was still eating fish, and I would show up at the fish counter at Whole Foods and ask for the one fish that definitely just got pulled out of the water and clocked on the head immediately and did not suffocate and was just fine and really didn't even know what happened to them, and can I buy that fish and I'll pay you $8 million for that one fish. Like, the guy was just like, here she comes. I knew he could see me from a mile away. Like, here's the one I'm just going to tell stories to, and she'll pay whatever. Anyway, I'm glad he finally dropped the fish a long time ago. Yes. So I have dogs, as you know, 2 Chihuahuas, and it's been a journey with them too. And I am excited to dive in deeply with our guest on the digestive tract of dogs. When I was doing research for this show, I did find that their digestive period is about 8 to 9 hours, which is the same for humans. I couldn't find the length of their digestive tract. We know ours are 30 feet. And we know that carnivores' digestive tract are really short, really short. It takes a lot longer for our to digest plant food because of the fiber-rich materials in it. And so anyway, we're going to get all of this cleared up because I'm positive that it is a dilemma like it is for us, for almost every one of our listeners that has companion animals in their house. So like so many of us, so many of you that are listening and both of us, our guest today grew up loving some animals and eating others. And we talk about that all the time on the show, and that quagmire and that process to kind of unravel that. But she made the switch eventually over to plants. And then Lindsay Rubin found a job that took her back to her dog sitting days in high school. Lindsay was the first employee at V-Dog, which is a plant-based dog food and treat company, which I feed one of my dogs, but both of them absolutely go bananas and salivate for V-Dog's breath bones. So Yodi, my little guy who had his 14th birthday yesterday, he runs around in just insane circles around my feet, round and round and round and round until they split one every night because they're Chihuahuas. They're very tiny, so we split one every single night. And then Lola, who is completely blind, jumps up as high as she can and back down, not really knowing where she's going to land. But that is the thrill and excitement that she has to be able to get just half of one of these green breath bones. I mean, it's a whole thing every single night before Kirk and I sit down to dinner because that's when they eat their bones. And if we run out, which a terrible mother I have done twice, it's depression. I mean, we feel terrible. We're eating our food. They've already had dinner and they just stare at us like, what are you doing, lady? So Lindsay is the one that's responsible for this enormous growth that this incredible company has seen, and consequently the rise of popularity in this subject, right, in vegan dog food. So we have a lot of questions. I know everyone out there does. I want to kind of traverse into, our dogs omnivores? Are they like us in that sense? What's the science behind the answer? What is the environmental ancestry that brings that into the discussion on what they can and cannot digest, what their digestive tract looks like? So let's just start with Lindsay. We've heard you talk a lot about different podcasts and interviews that dogs have evolved from wolves. We know that dogs descended from, evidently in our research, the gray wolf in Europe, and it could have been anywhere from 20,000 to 40,000 years ago. What do we know about today's modern evolved dog's digestive tract? And what's the science that tells us that they are omnivores, which I'm assuming that you think they are, since you, yes. And welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. And yes, this is hitting the nail on the head with the biggest misconception about dogs and their diet. So dogs are physiologically omnivorous, which means they can digest and make excellent use of starches. So they're omnivores like us. And when I refer to it as misconception, I always talk about if you're watching a commercial on TV for a popular dog food and you kind of see a dog running in the wild and they kind of jump over a log and they turn into a wolf all of a sudden. And like that's the the kind of rationale behind this. But if you really, behind the marketing, I should say, but if you look at the science, like you said, Dotsie, dogs have evolved for tens of thousands of years, and they're now physiologically omnivorous. So they're able to digest these starches, and not only digest them, but they make excellent use of them through a certain gene called the AMY2B gene.
Okay, so now you have to talk to me about that gene, because you just said something I've never heard before.
Yes. Yeah, so the gene has to do with amylase secretion. So something there's a bit of a misconception about is if I feed my dog a vegan diet, it's like overworking their pancreas. That's what some people who are well-versed in the topic might bring up. But what it comes down to is through these thousands and thousands of years of evolution, they've developed, depending on the breed, up to 30 copies of that gene, which scientifically allows them to actually digest and turn those starches, those starchy foods, plant-based foods, into usable energy.
Okay. So dogs, wild dogs today, like when you know, there's not a lot of
coyotes or
or just in every other country where there's just a wild chihuahua. I mean, you know, they just don't have a home. Are they eating like nuts and seeds and berries and stuff from bushes?
Possibly, but the biggest thing about how dogs evolved is that they're scavengers. So they evolved mostly alongside human agricultural civilization. So they evolved eating our scraps. I mean, I was in India earlier this year. There's lots of stray dogs there. Actually, one of the biggest studies on dogs eating meatless diets was in India, because there is less meat consumption in India traditionally. So the dogs there, therefore, don't get a lot, if any, meat, the ones that are living on the streets. So that's an interesting kind of population study that can be looked up online. So they're not necessarily like going to bushes and picking, you know, seeds or nuts. They really grew alongside humans as scavengers, and they really eat what they can grab and take alongside humans.
That makes sense. They are kind of always in the trash. And thank you, stray dogs, not wild dogs. That's what I meant to say.
Oh, yeah. Well, I couldn't grab the word either. So, you talk about this gene, but Dotsie brought up something about their intestines and the fact that scientists have noted that animals who are herbivores have the longest intestines, omnivores have the medium length intestines, and carnivores tend to have the shortest intestines, because God forbid you'd want meat fermenting inside you for very long. So do modern dogs have longer intestines, or was it just this gene that was able to digest starch that makes dogs now different from dogs then?
Mm-hmm. From what I know, the intestine size hasn't drastically changed. It's mostly due to the gene that allows them to properly digest the starches that wolves simply don't have. They don't have up to 30 copies of this same gene. So that's really the biggest difference that evolution has shown over the tens of thousands of years.
I just want to make a comment about dogs that I always find amazing. Dogs are the most diverse looking group of creatures than any other animal. I mean, if I didn't know that a Chihuahua and a Wolfhound were the same, they were both dogs, I guess what I call them species.
Same species, right.
I wouldn't know from looking at them, right? You don't get the variety in cats like that.
Oh, I guess
or
in
any other species, not even humans, you know? So anyway, that's the thing I find amazing about dogs. They're so varied. In fact, what I in my reading, I learned that there was a collie called Bramble who was vegan and lived to the age of 27 and was in the Guinness Book of World Records. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. Now that's just obviously a science experiment of one, so we can't base it on that. But I know, Lindsay, you know of a lot of other studies that have been done that show that dogs thrive when they're eating a non-meat diet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually spoke to Bramble's mom over the phone. She's over in England, and she told me all about Bramble's story for a blog post that we did on the VDog blog. That remains one of our most popular clicked links because it's just so amazing. She does a lot of really healthy home gardening and fully vegan home cooking for her dogs. So Bramble was one of her previous dogs that lived till that amazing age. So we do have that story on our website, and it was so amazing actually connecting with her. As far as other studies and research and scientific information, that's an area that needs expansion for sure for this type of topic. What recently wrapped up most recently was a study on a population of dogs that switched from a meat-based diet to a vegan diet, and they did use VDog. And this was over at Ross University in St. Kitts, Ross Veterinary University. So this is in the process of being published, and the abstract is published online. And in summary, what it showed is that the dog population that switched from a meat-based dry food to VDog, all of their levels were perfectly fine. One nutrient that people worry about is taurine. The dog's taurines remain totally stable, their taurine levels. Some even went up slightly. So we'll have that study soon as it's published and from Ross University. But there needs to be more information on this topic for sure. It's definitely, as much as at VDog we have tons and thousands of dogs as anecdotal evidence, we understand that there needs to be more science. So there's also one pending down in LA on the topic of vegan dogs as well. So there's basically a lot in the works, but it's definitely an area that needs a lot more scientific exploration.
Mm-hmm. But isn't a vegan diet can be good for dogs that might have allergies or some joint issues or high inflammation numbers? They're definitely just like humans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So most of our customers at VDog are vegans themselves or vegetarians, people who don't want to lug that big bag of meat-based food into their home every month. And they kind of, just like I did years ago, have this light bulb moment where, oh, I'm fully vegan and my house is fully vegan, but I'm still bringing this big bag of animal products in. And do I have another option? They start Googling. So that's a really common experience. But another segment of people that feed their dogs a plant-based diet or VDog is for allergies, definitely, because it is directly linked to reduction in inflammation. And we've seen the most incredible stories of people who aren't vegan themselves, but it was recommended to them. They've tried everything possible from a raw meat diet to, they call it exotic protein, where it's like kangaroo and all this stuff that has unfortunately become popular in the pet food industry. And the plant-based diet has been the only thing that works for them. Their hair grows back, they get less itchy, their tummy troubles go away, they have healthier poops, and in general, their kind of spectrum of health really tends to improve on this diet.
Let's talk about traditional commercial dog food to start with. What is it? What is most of it made of? Like if you're not cooking fresh from home, what's in the bag? I've heard that in animal traditional wide scale confinement animal agriculture that only about a quarter of it is for humans, and then the rest is waste, and that's what goes to the dogs. Is that even remotely correct? And what is in, I don't know, Alpo or whatever you might just buy at the market?
Yeah, I don't know if you want to know.
We do. Our listeners want to know. That's why we're here.
I know when I buy kibble for my kitties, the list of ingredients is so long. I can't read 3/4 of it. And usually if whatever animal it says it's from, if you look at the back, chicken is always the first ingredient anyway, no matter what, even if chicken's not on the front.
Yeah, they do a lot of blending and meals, like ground meals where it's the meat blended with other things. But in summary, it's kind of the scrap. It's the stuff that's cast aside that's not fit for human consumption most of the time. And really, something really interesting is how the pet food industry got started, kind of thinking of it full circle. So say about 100 years ago, the first canned and packaged dog food was back when there were still horse-drawn carriages. So they would use the slaughtered horse meat or horses that would die on the street, and they would use that and market it as this great dog food, and it was horse meat. And it was this kind of sought after product, as before that people really didn't feed dog food, like packaged dog food, to their dogs. So then that's where it started. Now fast forward to nowadays, kind of thinking back to the vegan aspect of this, is oftentimes there are tests done on commercial meat-based pet foods, and there are things found such as euthanasia drugs, or the DNA of the meat mentioned doesn't match what the test shows, but every once in a while it shows that there's horse meat in the food, and it's this big uproar. But, to me and to people who don't eat any animals, it's like, well, if it's a horse, if it was supposed to be a cow, that cow is deserved to live just as much as a horse would have. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting thinking of it full circle from when it was kind of touted as this one meat, and now it's a totally different, and it's this taboo to go back to how it started. But yeah, it's a lot of fillers and byproducts and meat meals. And traditionally it's a lot of scrap product that's used in these big commercial meat-based dog foods.
So food's not fit for human consumption. Go ahead and give us the dirty. What is it? What's the scraps?
Yeah,
what are we talking about here?
It's called 4D. So a lot of times it's from downed animals that are not fit enough to like walk to the slaughterhouse floor. So they're kind of sick, or another one of the 4Ds stands for diseased. So when they cut some of the meat off, it might have a tumor or like pus coming out of it. I don't know if any of you have seen those like really gross videos from, like slaughterhouse footage and stuff. There's just like sometimes really bad growths and stuff. So that can go into pet food industry, the pet food industry, dying animals. So it's basically all this stuff that's unfit for human consumption. And that's a big part of why it's so cheap. I mean, these supply chains are set up to pump out tons of really, really cheap ground up meat to feed to our pets. And luckily, it seems like the industry is shifting away from that with a lot healthier brands and more plant-based brands for dogs. Mm-hmm. But so much of it is so terrible and also not ethical. That's another big component of it as well.
When you say not ethical, is that you as a vegan, or are there other non-ethical issues that any pet owner would be concerned about?
I think that most people that love their dogs understand that no animal wants to become food. So I think there's definitely an overlap. But as a vegan, it's any animal used in the supply chain for profit, to me, is not ethical. I think that all animals want to live, and I love my dog just as much as I love a cow and a pig, and they're all incredible, intelligent, sentient beings. So if we can remove that part from the supply chain and feed dogs a food that they love the taste of, that they're going to thrive on, we kind of see that as a win-win.
I agree with you completely, because Dotsie and I have been vegan for a long time. But what do you say to people who say dogs are supposed to eat meat, or, for example, my cats? So it's actually selfish of us to force this food on them. I mean, mm-hmm. I certainly complain about the fact that cows are not fed their natural food, which is grass. Mm-hmm. So what do you say to people who say, it's animal abuse actually for you not to feed dogs, and maybe you can weigh in about cats too, because I wonder if you've ever thought about branching out into the vegan cat food industry, but that it's not right for us to force our ethics on our animals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we hear the animal abuse angle from time to time, and what we usually say to that response is kind of digging into what animal abuse really is. And when you look at the big picture, when animals are confined and slaughtered to become food for other animals, it doesn't make total sense. So kind of going back to which animal is being abused, and if my dog can eat a food that they love, that they're going to be perfectly healthy on, that doesn't require another animal to live, that's quite the opposite of animal abuse. If you can save all the farmed animals and then feed your dog a perfectly nutritious diet, that seems like the opposite of animal abuse to us. And speaking to the topic of if people are, making choices for dogs, ethical choices that they can't necessarily make themselves. Well, if our dogs are our babies and our children, and they're no longer for many thousands of years out in the wild chasing after their own food and hunting in any way, they're not these wild outdoor dogs. They're in our homes, they're sleeping in our beds. We open up a package of food and pour it in a bowl, or we cook for them and put it in their bowl and they eat it. We're responsible for their health and their well-being, just as we are for human children. So as the parents, as the adults, it's our choice, or it's our responsibility to research and provide the most balanced, healthiest, ethical food for our dogs. And then speaking about cats, this is, if you think vegan dogs is a polarizing topic, cats even more so. So speaking personally, I think it's doable. I think that cats require nutrients, not ingredients. And some of us at VDog have some friends that have raised their cats on vegan food, and they do totally fine. There's a brand called Omni that we usually recommend. It has, when you look at the ones on the market, the ingredients aren't, like, I'm not super, super excited about them. Like, I think Omni has some corn in it, and that's maybe not ideal for some cats, but we have friends whose cats have done really well on this. And if it has the balanced nutrition that they need, there really shouldn't be an issue. And at VDog, we're sticking to dogs for now, but we'll see what the future holds. But it's definitely a really, really passionate topic for sure.
How did you find yourself in this space? Like, tell us your personal journey to becoming the very first employee at VDog.
Yes. So I was vegetarian throughout college, and I went vegan after college, after I basically had a bit more time to really digest and understand that when animals are used for any animal products along the food supply chain, their best interest isn't in mind. It's profit that's prioritized. So soon after that, I went vegan and stopped eating all animal products. And it was shortly after that that I ended up moving out to the West Coast, and I met our late founder, Dave Middlesworth, and started working with him. I was living in Sacramento at the time, and the funniest story is that I saw VDog pop up on a Facebook post, and it said local Sacramento company. And I was like, when I get an idea in my mind, I'm so passionate about it when it comes to veganism. I'm like, I have to meet this company, and I have to, figure out how I can work for this company. So that was a really exciting moment for me when I started working with Dave, and then things have evolved and shifted over time in the last 7 or so years. But it's been my dream to work not only with dogs. As you mentioned, I grew up dog sitting and so obsessed with dogs. I was kind of always that friend who was obsessed with animals, horses, cats, everything. So fast forward till now, it's really all of my passions and interests coming together. So I'm really grateful for that.
What was you said you loved animals as a child, but you did eat milk and dairy. What was the moment that opened your eyes to another way?
When I think back to when I was little, and even a teenager and college, I was just somehow never really exposed to it. I never knew anyone that was vegan, maybe a couple of vegetarians. And I remember not even really knowing where meat came from till a really old age, like too old, and just not really thinking about it. And what ultimately opened my eyes was I was in a college environmental class, environmental studies, and one of my classmates did a presentation actually on switching out for her whole family for like a week. They went to all veggie burgers instead of meat-based burgers, and she calculated the water that was saved and all of these statistics on it. And I was like, that is so cool. And in addition to the fact that I really love animals, let's give this a try. And I just overnight stopped eating meat. So it was kind of a combination of these forces of like, I already don't like the feeling of this. And then this clearly is better for the environment based on what my classmate is talking about. I did some more research. So that was really the eye-opening moment for me. It's funny thinking back because it wasn't this like stellar presentation or anything. It was pretty minimal, but I think I kind of had this seed planted before it kind of blossomed from there.
And then when did you make the switch to vegan? How did you recognize that it wasn't enough just to not eat meat?
Mm-hmm. After college, I definitely had a different schedule, different capacity to kind of absorb things online. So it was definitely being exposed through social media to more videos, to more content online of what happens to baby chicks and what happens to baby cows in the dairy industry. And I am such a sensitive animal lover. As soon as I understand the kind of full spectrum of something, I really connected and said, well, if I'm not eating meat, but I'm drinking milk or I'm eating something with dairy or butter in it, I'm causing the same reaction along the supply chain for this animal to be harmed ultimately. And that's not what I want. And I don't think that's what anyone wants. No one goes out wanting animals to be harmed. It's more so once we open our minds to it and once we're exposed to the information, we're able to kind of take it for ourselves and figure out how that fits into our path. And for me, it was really understanding really what goes on in the dairy and egg industries to the animals and how it's really not that different than the meat and egg industries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When you are at VDog for the last 7 years, right? You said?
Yes.
Okay, so you get, I bet, thousands of emails over the last 7 years from customers who are wanting to change over or have changed over and it's not working, or have changed over and it's, saved their dog's life, like you were mentioning earlier with some canines. I have two Chihuahuas, like I mentioned. One of them really thrives on VDog. The other one, since he was little, he's 14, like I mentioned, and so it was before I knew anything. So I bought him at a pet store. Okay, so he's puppy mill dog, and like Lord knows, he has always been allergic to everything. And it took a while to figure out. So early on, it was chicken and turkey we figured out, and corn and all sorts of different types of grains, and Lord knows what else. Like, he just has always had allergy problems.
Is that is that because he came from a puppy mill and got sick early, or because he's been bred purebred? They're much more fragile.
Lindsay probably has the better answer. I'm assuming it's a combination of the two, and then other things I don't even know about of why because the other one is a Chihuahua, but she's from the shelter and definitely way more of a mutt just in the way that she looks. And, she's like ironclad everything. I mean, you just can whatever with her, and I'm cool. So he's always been allergic to everything. And he had issues with anything that went through a process, anything, including VDog. So then I started making him fresh vegan food, and I made it with potatoes, carrots, peas, squash, coconut oil, bananas, sometimes blueberries, applesauce. I looked up all these different recipes, tried different combinations, and we went through. Literally, I went through 3 full 3-week trials of this, and then him going back to his meat-based dog food, which just, I can't even hardly say it. But every time we would try with the starchy, plant-based food, he would start wheezing, start coughing, and I noticed lethargy. So then, of course I did, then he went back to his meat for 3 weeks, and then I went through this 3 full times, 3 weeks at each time. And he wouldn't thrive. And I would change the recipe a little bit. I mean, I learned early on that we couldn't do any kind of grains, and he was allergic to processed grains. We knew that, but they would also when I did the fresh ones, it would get stuck in his throat. And I learned early, okay, so that's when I switched to potatoes and sweet potatoes and things like that. So when you have these calls of people that are like me, what is going on? Why is it? I mean, I guess it's like humans, right? Like some of us maybe wouldn't thrive on plants or a vegan diet. But what's going on in their digestive tract? Is it just a long-standing combination of their ancestry and probably the inbreeding and some of the things that Alexandra just mentioned? I feel like I tried hard enough, and definitely. And I feel like every time I went back, I was doing him a disservice. And when I got him, I promised I would take care of him the very best I could till his final day. And I felt like I wasn't doing that. Even when I was doing the test, it's kind of like, oh, this is terrible. I'm putting him through this. What are some of the common situations or allergens in the ingredients that I've listed? What is going on, and what do you tell customers? Because I know that there are many listeners that we have right now that are shaking their head going, yes, I tried too. And why didn't it work? And what can we do? Or what should we try?
Yeah, I think that what you said is exactly right, is that it's a combination of a few major things. And that is breeding, possible inbreeding if they're from a puppy mill, combined with allergies, and then really a big part of it is too that they're individuals, which you also touched on. I mean, the fact that there are only a few commercial vegan diets right now, and the fact that that space is expanding is a great thing, because when people come to us and they say, I tried V-Dog, it didn't work for my dog, what do I do? We don't want them to go back to meat-based food. That's the last thing we want them to do. So we recommend other brands. We're very transparent and open about that. Now, there aren't that many brands to recommend. There's just a couple of others. So that's wonderful that you tried like at home cooking, because not everyone will do that. They'll kind of just switch back to a meat-based food right away, which is a bit more of a common experience we hear, because it's really time consuming and energy consuming. It's a big deal. And you don't want your dog to have to go through all sorts of stuff. So we definitely hear that from time to time. And it really comes down to the fact that they're individuals and they can have all sorts of random ailments. What I can tell you specifically related to data is that the highest percentage of allergies in dogs are related to animal products, specifically beef, chicken, and dairy, as well as eggs. So there are going to be individual cases where dogs have sensitivities based on their breeding or various digestive components. But in the grand scheme of things, it's really these animal products that cause the major allergies. But from time to time when people kind of tell us, oh, I've tried everything, it's so individual and it has to be what works for your dog. But home cooking is a good option because you can really weed stuff out. But it is important when you home cook to make sure it's complete in balance with the supplement. So there are vegan supplements online that you can purchase and kind of sprinkle on the home cook. So definitely recommend that for anyone who's trying to cook for their dog at home.
I did like a seaweed, sea vegetable sprinkle, and then it's called like Veggie Dog. You probably know, and it's a sprinkle and it's got the taurine and everything, and put that on top of it. And flaxseed meal I put in there too. Was there anything on the list that the listeners might be feeding their dogs that I read to you that you would say, ooh, don't do that?
Honestly, not necessarily. A big thing people get hung up on is grains. We have grains in our dog food, and we have so many dogs that have switched previously on grain-free dog foods, switched just fine to the V-Dog. It's really become a huge marketing concept of grain-free food. And it was late last year, there was this whole thing with grain-free food coming out as related to heart issues. And there was all this stuff wrapped up in it that it's really kind of breaking through the grain-free misnomer, because when you look at the science, first of all, there are so many different kinds of grains. So having this blanket term of like, I feed my dog grain-free, it's like, well, what about this? There's so many different grains. So even when you say that, I kind of know people are probably like, oh yeah, my dog's grain-free too. But like really do like whoever, if anyone's listening to this and wants more info on the grain-free, you can look on our blog. We have more information. You're welcome to reach out to us. But what it really comes down to is that dogs do well on grains. There's so many different kinds. But honestly, I don't, out of the ones you mentioned, like squash, blueberries, flaxseed, those all sound like extremely healthy foods. So it's hard to say. It's most likely an individual thing, like one of those things triggering some kind of inflammatory response.
Something so frustrating. With the vegan mom. I mean, really, Yodi? Come on. Like, hang with me here. The other one does. Like, you can.
So for people who are struggling, they want to transition their dogs over, but V-Dog isn't helping with them. They have a couple other dog foods, vegan dog foods to choose from. But when they make the switch, how should they do it? Just like people, I would imagine a lot of people who go vegan from a low fiber carnivore diet, their digestive system can't handle it because they don't have the right microbiome, the right bacteria in there to digest the vegan food, the vegetables and the fruit and all that fiber. How do you recommend somebody transition a carnivorous dog to a vegan diet?
Mm-hmm. Something that we see often is people being really concerned about the transition and, is my dog going to get a really upset stomach? What's going to happen? So we definitely hear this a lot from new customers. And what we've really held true to for many years is that it's really, really easy to transition. And from what we've seen, the transition really mimics switching from any meat-based dog food to another meat-based dog food. It's what we make is a dry food. So the transition is the same as if you were switching between other meat-based foods. It's about 7 days. Some dogs will be shorter, some dogs will be longer. I've had dogs who would take the full 7 days. I've had dogs who would have no issues at all in 2 days fully switched over. So again, it's like a little bit of that individual component. But my biggest advice is don't be afraid of the transition. We have not seen issues. Dogs tend to take to it really well, and they also really love the taste. So we hear really often that they'll actually leave the meat-based kibbles in the bowl and like pick around and eat the vegan ones out. So it's a very easy transition, and there might be a little bit of a slight digestive upset, but honestly, most of our customers don't even see that.
Yeah, just do. Let's talk about ingredients. I have the breath bones here, which, like I mentioned, my dogs go bananas for. So there's some brown rice flour and sweet potatoes and pumpkin and carrots, calcium. That's good that you put that in there. Cinnamon, chia seeds, broccoli, parsley. And he does well with these. So tell us about. It sounds like I've kind of wanted to try one before. Have you had? Have you?
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
The breath bones they're a little hard, but if you give
taste,
it a little nibble, it's pretty good.
They smell so good.
Can I smell?
Yeah. Well, you got to open it because that's
so good. Yeah. My breath is actually sleeping under the desk here, so I can't say the B word because he'll pop up and get all excited. But they definitely know the word, just like yours.
Yeah. Yeah. And their breath's amazing.
Oh my gosh.
Right. I know.
It's like a potpourri in here.
Do you want to try one afterwards?
I want to try one right now.
Okay. Here we go.
Can I?
Yes.
Here, Dotsie.
Alexandra eating a dog breath bone.
Do you want me to? You don't want to share? Okay.
No, you do it.
It's really hard.
Okay, she said that. Yeah, they like that.
And by the way, I've eaten cat food, the meat kind, because I eat stuff that falls on the couch. I think, oh, that's chocolate, and I pick it up. Oh yeah. I'm famous for eating cat food, so I can vouch that this tastes really good. This is human grade, for sure.
Okay, all right. So maybe Kirk and I'll have one tonight.
Especially.
I feel like I need some alcohol before I try this.
and Kirk has to jump up as high as your dog does and do a little twirl.
It's really high. It's like this high, and she's like this big.
I'm going to take this with me because I have a 2-hour drive home. So I'm going to take it with
me. Dip it in your coffee a little bit,
It's got a really good cinnamon taste.
You guys maybe need to write on here cool for humans. I mean,
good for humans too.
Little snacks, because I don't think they're very calorie dense. So humans would probably pick up on that.
They'll take a while.
Tell us about what's in the dog food, because I don't have that here with me to read the ingredients, so people get a sense of what's in the food.
Yes, yeah. So it's a whole food based formula, and it's mostly peas and pea protein. So that's where the protein comes from. It's about 24% protein, so it has plenty of protein for adult dogs. And as far as other ingredients, we use oats, brown rice, quinoa, lentils, sorghum. There's some cranberries and blueberries in there. So it's all really healthy and nutritious stuff. And then if you look at towards the end of the ingredient list, you'll see all of the vitamins and minerals. So there's vegan vitamin D, there's B12, taurine, L-carnitine, everything in there that a dog needs to thrive. So our first and foremost was having it be a nutritionally balanced food. And we also want it to taste really good. So the dogs really, really love it. It has a really nice, strong pea smell, and a really veggie, strong flavor that we think a lot of dogs really haven't experienced before. And that's why they really run to the dog bowl and really take to it.
Well, I'm going to have to try that because I really like pea protein in my protein powder, so I'm sure I'll like that.
You have a whole new food line that you're eating now.
I'm going to go to the pet store and I'm going to start buying dog food, and they're going to think V-Dog, and they're going to think, you have a dog, Alexandra.
No, I'm eating it. Yeah, there you have it, people. Okay.
I wanted to ask about your company was founded by a gentleman who really had an ethical reason for founding it. And he passed away at age 75. But tell us a little bit about, is it Dave Whittlesworth?
Middlesworth, yeah.
Middlesworth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Dave started the company along with his wife, Linda, back in 2005. So really the goal was there wasn't anything on the market that they were really, really jazzed and excited about because they knew dogs could be vegan. They knew that dogs could thrive in this type of diet. So Dave really just decided to start it himself with Linda's encouragement and support, based on a social justice perspective and the perspective of removing animals from the food chain in the pet food industry, removing them from the dog food bowl, because if it's not necessary, why do it? It's not ethical from an animal lover standpoint. It's not sustainable environmentally. And nutritionally, dogs can absolutely thrive on this balanced diet without any meat in it. So that was kind of the take that he started everything with, but it's definitely founded in removing animals from the entire situation and no longer seeing them as food.
Mm-hmm. And that was back in 2005. What was the reaction in the pet industry to putting this on the shelves?
We started even back then as an e-commerce company. So Dave set us up really ahead of the times, as far as Amazon wasn't huge back then. It existed, but it wasn't anywhere where it is now. And most pet food companies weren't online then. So we definitely have a bit of an advantage of being set up as an e-commerce company first and foremost, and we remain that way. We sell on our website, Amazon and Chewy as well. So we kind of were able to circumnavigate those reactions at the pet food store. We just went directly to customers, and the way that we initially marketed and spread the word was through a lot of veg fests and local vegan communities. So we really connected directly with people looking for this product through these events. So that was a lot of how we got started in the beginning.
How far away or how close do you think we are to animal shelters accepting and feeding their dogs vegan dog food?
I hope it's in the near future. It's a bit hard to say because we actually were involved in some conversations with some shelters down in LA wanting to turn the shelters vegan down there and change over to vegan food. And what we saw is it was really wrapped up in politics, unfortunately, for these like city shelters, because it makes sense, various things have to be passed and it has to be put in front of boards. So it becomes this kind of polarizing topic. Even though, from our perspective, it makes perfect sense. And there are plenty of reasons to do it from all different perspectives, but it gets really wrapped up in the politics a bit. So once the first shelter does it and provides this sort of proof of concept, it would be great if it could take off and expand to other shelters. There's a study happening in LA at some point related to the topic to try and encourage the shelters to see more of the data on the topic. So again, going back to the fact that we need more science in order to have this like really solid ground, even though we know it works from so much experience. I think that the shelter thing, it makes so much sense, and I would love to see it happen in the future.
Do you guys, do some shelters use some vegan dog food? Like, do you guys donate to shelters and do they use it, or is it just not even happening at all?
Yeah, we've been donating consistently to various rescue organizations and farm sanctuaries for years. It works for various organizations. It really depends on their setup, because at this point, our product, it's not a cheap product. It's expensive to produce. And something that we talk about a lot is, it's just vegetables. It should be cheaper. Why is VDOG so expensive? And what it really goes back to is the fact that the meat industry is completely subsidized. So if meat was at its actual cost, it would be astronomically higher, as everyone listening mostly knows. So when you look at peas compared to meat, the peas aren't subsidized. They're pretty expensive in the pet food industry. It's until now, it hasn't really been an extremely common ingredient. So we're really breaking through and kind of tapping into this whole new area. So the shelter component will hopefully come along with the cost landscape also improving.
Yeah, that makes sense. Ugh, right. It's political like everything else in our world.
I know.
Comes down to that, doesn't it, at the end of the day? Yeah, I have read a few times that if meat wasn't subsidized, like at McDonald's, you know how it's, you can get whatever you can get a Happy Meal for, let's say $1.99 or $2.99, and the salad's like $7, but the burger meal would be about $9 if it wasn't subsidized.
Is that
it
right?
would be $1.50 to $2 more than the salad if it was apples to apples, but it's not.
I wanted to ask you one last question since we're in the time of the coronavirus, and there's so much in the news about the fact that the meat industry is struggling because the slaughterhouses are closing down because there's so much infection amongst the slaughterhouse workers due to the conditions there for humans, which are terrible as well as for animals. So what they're doing is they're euthanizing millions and millions of animals on these factory farms because there's no other. Why am I saying euthanizing? They are murdering millions and millions of other animals, of animals in factory farms on the factory farm instead of taking them to the slaughterhouse. And they're doing it in horrendous ways, incredibly cruel ways.
Like gassing and foaming
to suffocate them, or turning up the temperature of the chicken barns so that they suffocate from the heat, extreme heat.
The lack of ventilation.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So how is that affecting the meat pet industry?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's directly affecting it. It's driving up the cost of meat, and that inevitably will drive up the cost of the final product. So with our product, we're so fortunate to not include any animal products. So we're really cushioned away from that, the whole supply chain and how it's been affecting so many brands. Everything within the production of all of our products has been extremely stable. We haven't seen any issues. And that's like pretty miraculous to say in the pet food industry, right? Where like 99% of these products are being affected, whether it's lack of production, lack of supply, increased costs. So there are a lot of things happening right now in the pet food industry as a reflection of these shutdowns and these changes to slaughterhouses and the whole dynamic of the meat industry. And we are set up in such that it doesn't affect our product. And that's something that's so incredibly unique in this space because it's so meat heavy. Like when you go to these events, there's an event called Super Zoo that is just all pet food industry. And you walk in and it's a little challenging as a vegan because it just smells like meat everywhere because there's like lots of meat treats and everything on display. And it's an incredibly animal product heavy industry. So to be able to say that it hasn't affected us at all is really something incredible to say out loud and kind of come to terms with it in the best way possible.
Well, I'm glad.
You do good comes to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
You guys
Lindsay.
are doing good. Thank you so much. You answered so many questions that we were curious about, and I know our listeners were too. Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much. I hope it was helpful. It's so nice to talk with you both.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Be well.
You too. Thank you.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switchforgood.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.